Fans have been waiting for quite some time to go back to the glamorous Regency world, and they are rightfully less than impressed with the cliffhanger ending of Part 1 of Bridgerton's latest season. For once, their consensus is overwhelmingly negative, and I honestly don't blame them. What started as a fresh and promising romantic storyline turned into the equivalent of stepping onto a clearly marked landmine, with Benedict Bridgerton coming up with an absurd, humiliating proposal. Based on Julia Quinn's An Offer from a Gentleman, this scene was decidedly ungentlemanly. But here's the thing, I have read the novel that Season 4 is based on, and you can be rest assured that despite the scene being quite backhanded, Netflix actually handled it better than how it played out in the book. As you know, the final scene of Part 1 unfolded slowly, with Benedict and Sophie coming face to face at a staircase in the Bridgerton mansion. The air, rife with sexual tension and unspoken words, became charged just enough for the pair to finally give in to their desires and kiss, and an orchestral cover of Olivia Rodrigo's Bad Idea, right? Played in the background. In hindsight, the song choice should have been an indication enough of what was coming. I mean, when someone starts a sentence with, "I meant it when I said you deserve better and I am determined to give it to you," is it not normal to think that a confession would follow? But boy, does Benedict screw up royally. He asks Sophie to be his mistress of all things and is rightfully met by a haunted kind of silence. So yeah, no one is happy about this audacious offer. Sophie leaves both him and the fans hanging because we have to now wait until the 26th of February to know what happens afterwards. Before I begin unpacking Benedict's logic behind his proposal to Sophie, I must stress that this is not intended to defend Benedict in any way. There's really no excuse for him saying that he wants to give Sophie everything and in the same breath ask her to be his mistress, as if that position was all she is worthy of. After screaming at my screen, I took some time to just understand his perspective and any reason he might have for his stupid proposal. It made me furiously binge read the novel, which intensified my anger towards him, but in some way also gave me the answers I was looking for. Firstly, Benedict is not the sharpest tool in the shed. This can be said of every Bridgerton man we have seen until now, but he's just more boneheaded than his brothers. I have no way of knowing if Edmund was similar, but for Violet's sake, I hope he wasn't. Anyway, the point here is the fact that Benedict might act like he is not your typical Regency Era gentleman on the outside, but he's still very much shaped by the same society he wants to shrug off. So far, we've seen him as the artistic, non-conforming, rebellious guy who mocks shallow norms, but all that is just him being holier than thou. In his mind, Sophie might be something more tantalizing than any fantasy, but she is still way below his station. He feels for her, that part is true, but he has not had the conversation with himself about what it really means to be a true nonconformist. He cannot fathom marrying someone outside his class, and this fear has been simmering in his head for a while. Unfortunately, it revealed its ugly head in the worst moment possible. This is exactly why he stumbles so spectacularly, and instead of offering Sophie the eternity she deserves, which he even says, he gives her less than the bare minimum by simply saying that the most he can do for a maid is to keep her behind closed doors. This is a classic case of insecurity masked by a savior complex, because in his mind, he truly believes this is the best possible future someone like Sophie can have. Yes, the show has been revolutionary in certain ways because we've seen black and colored people in leading roles, even within the context of the show itself, but that does not mean Bridgerton exists in a vacuum. The rigid class stratification of the Regency era has been highlighted perfectly in Season 4. To us, Benedict's offer is outrageous and humiliating, but it makes sense for him because having a mistress was not exactly an uncommon practice at the time. Many women were loved in private but never legitimized. The company that Benedict keeps also does not help his reasoning in any way, because he sees people keeping mistresses and still being happy. While they had to marry according to class, they were free to love anyone they wanted. That's exactly why he offers Sophie the chance to be his mistress, because he believes they can both be happy with that outcome. The scene was difficult to watch, no doubt, but those of you who have read the novel know just how much it was toned down. Again, that does not magically excuse what Benedict did, but it seems like an important point to note for everyone who's saying that Bridgerton is cherry-picking aspects of historical society to suit the show's narrative. Benedict Bridgerton in Julia Quinn's novel is a genuinely unlikable character. His proposal to Sophie does not simply end with asking her to be his mistress. He then blackmails her to accept it and move into the Bridgerton house, saying that if she refuses, he will complain to the magistrate about her having stolen from him. He adds a pinch of lazy romance after this by explaining that he's okay with Sophie hating him, as long as she stays with him. I fail to see how this qualifies as love in any way, but the author sort of defended him at a book event a few years back by saying that, given the social situation in the 1800s, this was the only option Benedict had. In fact, she also pointed out that while Benedict and Sophie did reconcile and marry in the end, they had to live a quiet life in the country because it was still not an accepted union in mainstream society. Moreover, the books are very much in tune with history and not as inclusive as what we are used to seeing on screen. Thankfully, the show has taken a much more delicate approach, and the entire part about blackmailing Sophie into accepting the offer was done away with. As I said, before the idea of a mistress was planted into Benedict's head by his friends, but due to the clever changes from page to screen, his proposal in the show feels more like a last resort than a first instinct. Jess Brownell, the showrunner of Bridgerton, has said that while it was not totally unreasonable for him to have said that, it was still a huge mistake on Benedict's end. He did not see Sophie beyond the confines of her class, so outrage is a very natural response to the scene. She also talks about how a big part of his progressive attitude has been purely performative so far, because, for all his words, he went back to traditional values when considering a wife. He lives an incredibly privileged life and has never really done anything truly scary. Wanting to pursue art was probably the only radical decision he had made, and he even got away with that since his brother paid for his admission, which was again due to the privilege associated with being a Bridgerton. Benedict is nowhere close to being as brave as he believes himself to be because he simply has never had the need to put himself in a position that requires him to display any real courage. Despite his family standing, if he were to pursue an open relationship with the maid, society would punish him. Most importantly, his sisters would be affected because their marriage prospects would diminish because of him. Having said that, what does the mistress tag mean for Sophie? I mean, it's extremely one-sided to only consider Benedict's situation here. For Sophie, this offer is downright humiliating in a way that Benedict has no idea about. Had she been anyone else, the offer would still have been insulting. But for Sophie, it carries a much deeper implication, which is why it completely crushes her. Her past is tied to the very thing Benedict demanded from her. She was raised in a space between wealth and servitude as a bastard child of a wealthy lord. For her, the word mistress is not simply offensive, it's traumatic. So, while Benedict thinks he is giving her a life of comfort, he is unknowingly echoing the very pain she has spent her whole life trying to transcend. Her entire existence has been defined by a lack of legitimacy, and now she's being asked to be a kept woman bound to repeat her mother's life.
Your mother was a maid who let herself become a mistress.
In the show, she recoils and gets away from him, but her reaction was a little different in the book. She had contemplated the offer for herself, but her immediate thought was about her children. Illegitimate children were a natural consequence of having a mistress, so would her child suffer the same fate she did? It was really sad to read this part because you can truly see just how much trauma Benedict brought up for her in that moment. She imagined less about her life as his mistress, but more about the eventful fate of her children because they were very likely to be abused by whoever Benedict would lawfully marry. Even when Benedict's response in the book was to care for any children they would have, she was not convinced because he was far from offering her anything that would actually hold weight. While Brownell has not spoiled what is going to happen in part 2, she has stated that Sophie does not want to put her child in the same position she was once in, and there was a part of her that had hoped that what she shared with Benedict was special enough to overcome the obstacles of class. Of course, she is left heartbroken when he turns out to be just as prejudiced as anyone else in the ton. So, does that make Benedict a villain? Well, in the literal sense, he really cannot be the villain because it is his season after all. Figuratively, too, he is not exactly a villain, but simply a really cowardly fellow. He's not a bad man, at least not in the show. However, book Benedict is not redeemable. Sure, he does care about Sophie, maybe more than he has for anyone else, but this is not enough. In that sense, his offer reveals where he still needs to grow. It's not excusable or charming or respectable in any manner. It is regressive and a complete deviation from Benedict's usual haughty demeanor. It proves that he's no better than the society he's so critical of. His portrayal in the show has made him more aware of consent and class difference, but that's no consolation. The good thing is, this means there's no other way for them to end up together, unless he does better and makes up for his massive mistake. Having said that, Sophie's detailed reaction to Benedict's offer will define what happens next. There's going to be some fallout, which will push both of them into uncharted emotional territory. In the novel, it took a long time for Benedict to get things right, but I'm hoping that the show begins his redemption arc as soon as possible. We know for sure that Sophie will not stand to be his secret, so he will have to do a lot of growing up to face not just the ton, but his own insecurities. Some Some fan theories also suggest that Benedict has not fully gotten over the lady in silver, the woman he's been pining for all season. This lingering obsession might have distorted how he approached Sophie with his half-baked proposal. I fully expect Part 2 to challenge both of them as well as other characters, as we wait to see if love can truly overcome class divide and prejudice. Well, that brings us to the very end of this video. What are your crazy theories about the upcoming episodes of Bridgerton Season 4? Let us know in the comments below. And if you like our content, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.